hand, and say, yes, I'd like to sign. She'll get your...
Do you have more than Hamilton County?
We have Warren and a spare as well.
Okay, because if you are not from Hamilton County, you have to tell them that you are not from Hamilton
Yeah,
County.
each county
Has to have its own page, so please be careful with it. Don't sound, if you're not from Hamilton County, don't sound, if you're from Warren County, we used to have a big Warren County contingent here.
Yeah, we have a Warren page already started.
Right, good, so.
There's a question here.
Oh, yes, I would also have petitions. I have one petition for...
Can't hear you, you have to go, kiss that microphone.
Speak directly into the mic.
Sorry, I have also petitions. I have a petition for...
You need to go get your food.
to get term limit for the county prosecutor, to make it like the mayor, city council, 2 consecutive terms of 4 years. Then needs to be a break so that people can widen their horizons and then they can run again. And this one is to avoid that the county prosecutor office becomes kind of a live appointment, and it also to try to increase the diversity, because so far in the 88 counties in Ohio there are mostly white men. We are less than 5 women and not that many also black representatives. So that one it is to be put on a statewide ballot. This is one. The other petition that I have, it is to lower the criminal level for non-violent drug possession. I don't know whether somebody else is already circulating. Okay, but I have it. This is that is run for the by the Amos Project, is to avoid that the prisons are full by non-violent drug, just for drugs possession. Not will be for dealing, that one is not for people that are selling, it's just for the possession.
Thank you. Eleanor, make sure you sign up for a name button.
Okay.
Say no. That reminds me, Eleanor is involved with the naturalization ceremonies. If you haven't done a naturalization ceremony, we have lots of them. You are guaranteed at least 60 people registered to vote. It's a really nice thing to do, and it's a really fun thing to do. So if you have not done a naturalization ceremony, please see me or get one of the forms that we have back. If you're interested, please do that. Let's see. Okay, I think we're ready to go on to our speakers. Any other announcements? Okay, we have 2 speakers, and first we have Tom Beridon. No. They're balancing the table, folks, and they weren't saying no to Tom Beridon. They're just trying to straighten out the lines here. Okay, so Tom Beridon is running for Common Pleas, as is our other speaker. And without further ado, Tom Beridon.
Hi, I want to thank you for having me out today. This is actually my 4th time here. I think the last time I was here was when Rob Richardson was here discussing the NAACP. It was a great discussion. I really appreciate what your group does. I started out in politics long time ago, back in the 90s at OU. But when I got here to Cincinnati, after I graduated from law school, I started at the Hamilton County Public Defender's Office, where I worked in the juvenile division for 4 years. And during those 4 years, I was very lucky I was able to work on some campaigns. And I ran David Crowley's first 2 campaigns for city council. David instilled in me what was already there, but made it stronger: dedication to public service, the courage to do what was right, and go out and make sure that everyone in Cincinnati was having a fair shake while on city council. So he passed away several years ago, which is a loss for the whole community, but he still instills those values, and I'm glad that he was here and was able to help the city as much as he did. I'm running for Common Pleas Judge. Does anybody know what Common Pleas Court is? No. Okay, so Common Pleas Court is the felony court, is the easiest way to think about it. That's where murder, arson, burglary, robbery, all of those are heard. Also, any civil cases over $15,000 are heard there as well. They have smaller docket, got 10 cases that morning, and they all start at 9 o'clock. I mean, they are incredibly good, the public defenders are right now, determining how they've got to get where and at what time. They know what judges are going to give them an extra 10 minutes. They know what judges will get them out really quickly when they walk in the door. And that's great, and they've adapted. You have to do that when you're a public defender. But we can make it easier for everyone, so there's better representation for everyone, so your public defender isn't having to run from the room and actually spend more time in the courtroom representing their client while they're there. But Ellen, it's a great question.
I have a question about the bail issue. I think it's probably overused, as we all think it's bad. There is a ballot effort going forward, and there is also a legislative effort by Mr. Devers going forward at the same time. And I was wondering if you're aware of that, and if not, what your thoughts on the matter is.
What's Devers' thing? I don't know what Devers
His is a legislative effort that makes a tool available to the judges for flight risk and whether or not a person should have bail or
I'm going to bring Terry up.
Okay, great.
So I'm Terry Nester. I know a little bit about that.
Oh, good.
What Devers is proposing is basically one of the measures of bail reform, which is that the courts would have a risk assessment tool. And you would look at that risk assessment tool. That risk assessment tool would allow you to determine whether or not the person is a flight risk and whether or not they should be imprisoned. It depends on the level of the offense, whether or not there's violence. And of course, that is something that the courts could work with both the legislature and the funding sources locally and nationally to figure out how we keep people out of jail. Because one of the big problems we have in our jail is overcrowding associated with people who are nonviolent. So yes, we could work with them and we should.
Okay, I was
Also,
wondering if there's a difference between that ballot effort and
Are you talking about the Amos
Devers.
ballot?
Yeah, because I think there's a ballot effort as well.
The Amos
sort of
ballot
that-
effort is the drug reform effort to make the non-criminal penalties for low-level drug offenses. That's different in the fact that it's a constitutional amendment,
Right.
which raises a lot of issues that, and I understand why Amos is going forward with it, because they haven't had success with the legislature trying to do it, so they're taking directly to the people. There are a lot of issues, though, with raising constitutional changes for dealing with specific crimes like that. If the Amos ballot measure would pass, it would state that there would be non-jailable offenses for low-level drug offenses, which would also include felony possession too. And then there would be a lot of legal challenges that would follow it up. What Terry was talking about, and I didn't realize, is that the courts do have that right now. My guess is that Devers' thing would make it mandatory for them to use. So those tools are available for judges right now. The probation department gives you a flight risk, a reoffense risk. When anyone comes up for bail, any judge can make that request. It's not always done. Sometimes it is, but most times it's not. If that would make it mandatory, I'd rather the judges implement it locally and put it into the local rules rather than making it a state law that has to be followed in every situation. I always worry about we get into issues like we do have with minimum mandatory sentences, which create a huge problem and still do. So the fact that we're talking about this, though, is what's important. The fact that you've got a Republican who's bringing this up in the legislature, the fact that you've got dedicated people out here are bringing these petitions to people so you become aware of the discrepancies in sentencing that we have is great. That pushes the court forward to start using the tools that they have. We actually have the analytical system, especially right now with AFTAB, to go in and to make sure that our sentences are not being biased. These are tools that are available. We just have to make all the judges aware that they're there. And when you're talking to judges and they're looking for your votes, that's something you need to ask. Do you want to use the tools that are available for you in determining bail and determining sentencing, working with the probation department, working with the clerk's office to make sure that you're not bringing any unintentional bias into this? Ellen brought this up at one of the last meetings we were at, is that everyone does have an unintentional bias. As a prosecutor, I knew it was there. As a public defender, I knew it was there. It wasn't as big an issue. As a hearing examiner, I know that it's there. I have to take into account when I'm hearing cases from people who don't look exactly like me or aren't exactly like me. And I have to understand that I have to listen to that case on its merits and not affect what they are bringing into the courtroom. There are facts that need to be looked at. You have to make the decisions on those. You can't base them on someone's appearance or someone's acting in the courtroom. It makes it difficult, but you have to be aware of that. There are a lot of judges who do that. And if you like me, that's someone else I will bring to the bench. So, thank you for all your questions. I'm going to turn this over to Terry so he can tell you a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Mike, did you have a question?
It's for both of you.
Okay.
Are you guys familiar with the concept of restorative justice?
Yes.
And those who are not, it's to help offenders be changed rather than just sent to prison. For example, many years ago, my son was 18, alcoholic. He broke windows at a school, and Judge Ruhlman sent him to prison for a year.
Yeah.
Instead of restoring the windows and going to rehab. So restorative justice, I think, is something we should be looking at. I wonder if you guys are into that.
I am, and that's one of the things that goes back to what I was talking about before with bail reform. We need to be spending that money not on keeping people in jail, but to fund the programs that can actually help people move past the issues that brought them to the courthouse. You have someone who comes in with an obvious alcohol or drug problem, we need to have them in treatment, because putting them in jail for a year is not going to solve the problem in most cases. It just is warehousing them. We don't have, the money from the state is dried up for the prisons and for the reform down here locally, so we don't have what we had before with the GED education able to do that while you're being held. We have those tools. We can put people on probation. We can put them into therapeutic programs so that we solve these issues. It's difficult as a judge, as a prosecutor. One of the things you have to balance is, when someone comes in and they've been hurt because of a crime, they are looking for retribution. They are looking sometimes for revenge. And the court's job, though, is to make sure that justice prevails. Sometimes that is locking someone up. But in a lot of cases, we have the tools that we can treat the underlying problem so that they stop offending, so that they can actually make restoration to the people they've hurt, rather than just locking them up. These are all tools that we have available. That's why we need a diverse bench, so we can have these conversations in Hamilton County. It's not a one-fit-all solution, but if we have people with different experiences on the bench, we can bring different solutions that we're not having right now.
Thanks, Tom. My name is Terry Nester. I am the Deputy City Solicitor for the City of Cincinnati. I have worked for the City of Cincinnati as a civil litigator since 2003. I will tell you a little bit about what I consider an exemplary day for me at the City of Cincinnati. I was in the courthouse at 1000 Main Street, and in the morning I was defending the city on an $800 case, and then I got to leave that courthouse, have lunch, walk down to the federal courthouse where I was defending the city in an $80 million claim. So I have experience at all levels of our court system, basically on the civil side. As Tom said, Tom also works for the City of Cincinnati. Until 2014, we were not allowed to run for public office because of the Cincinnati Charter. The Cincinnati Charter was changed, and that allows people like Tom and I, and in 2016, Peter Stackpole, to run for judge, and the city, for reasons you can ferret out yourself, is more likely to have Democratic lawyers working for them than in the county prosecutor's office. In 1926, the city of Cincinnati passed the city charter, and the Republican Party walked about 3/4 of a mile down Court Street, and they took up residence in the county administration building and our courthouse. Right now, we have 15 Common Pleas Court judges, one Common Pleas Court judge who has drug court jurisdiction. Of those 15 Common Pleas Court judges that hear general cases, there are 3 Democrats. 2 of those Democrats will be time limited by age in the next election. Our county right now, as exemplified by AFTAB and by the election of Marilyn Zayas, is really on the cusp of a generational change. And that generational change has to start with the people who maybe a lot of folks don't think about when they walk into the ballot box. The elected official that we hear the most about right now is the elected official, 1, who you don't want to touch you, and 2, is least likely to touch you in your life. That's the President of the United States. The persons that are most likely to touch you as someone who is a voter, who is dealing with your government, or your business, or your company, or your neighbor is a county official like a judge. And that's because people come to the courthouse to resolve disputes, whether they're criminal or civil. I've been doing that on behalf of the city of Cincinnati for 15 years. Tom has also been doing it for, I think, just about the same amount of time. I have been in Common Pleas most frequently, so it's the court that I'm the most familiar with. I have tried cases in Common Pleas. I have had many cases in our First District Court of Appeals. I've argued on behalf of the city of Cincinnati in the Ohio Supreme Court and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. I had a professional ambition when I finished law school to make it to the U.S. Supreme Court, but alas, with your help, I will be elected judge, and I won't be able to argue in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. But you never know. I'd be very frightened. Yeah, it'd be very, like when I argued in front of the Ohio Supreme Court, I found it a very, like, I felt physically ill as I walked up to do the argument. So I can only imagine what it's like to be in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm running for Common Pleas because I'm most familiar with that court. I'm going to tell you some of the things that I would do. I think these are the kind of things that Tom would do and the Democrats would do to change the culture in our courthouse, which has been dominated by the same party really for the past century, or maybe more. So, you know, that machine, the Republican machine, the Boss Cox machine, has controlled all of those offices since the time of the charter. We have the chance to change that, and we will, as a matter of progress, change that, and we can start changing that seat by seat with every election for a Democratic judgeship. And that will change the way our community interacts on the criminal level with the felonies, on the municipal level with people who are in line. We can fix the line. The line is a metaphor for a broken courthouse. We can fix that. I want to tell you the three things that I think are important, that I think we should do, that Democrats could do immediately, and it would have an effect on the legitimacy of the decisions that come out of our courthouse. For people to feel invested in good government, they have to understand that our judges' decisions are legitimate. And that's both through the decisions that they make when they write decisions, but also through the jury process. So the first thing that I think that I would do and advocate for is I would deepen the jury pool. Right now we have a jury pool selection process that includes only registered voters. The court has the option of including all licensed drivers. I was at a meeting and someone asked about, well, could we have both? And the answer is yes. I looked into that. You can have both of those roles of voters, and that increases the legitimacy, especially for our communities who feel like they don't have a voice in that jury process. I think a lot of people want to avoid a jury trial. I am a trial attorney. I like the drama of a jury trial. I think a lot of our judges are systematically avoiding jury trials, and I think it would be better for everybody sometimes to have a jury trial because it gives both the catharsis of that process, that's what a trial is for, and it gives you the community's judgment, not just a judge's judgment, but a jury of your peers, which is enshrined in our Constitution. So I think that's one change that we can make immediately that would be profoundly effective on how people perceive of the jury process in our county. The second thing that I think we should do is we should do in the county courthouse what we're doing at the city of Cincinnati. We have in the city of Cincinnati basically a web portal by which citizens can go and look at data associated with what the city does. Now, a lot of people don't go there, but if you do, you can see things as detailed as where the plow truck is in your neighborhood, where the pothole reports have been cited, and how quickly they are being filled, and a host of information which is so detailed as to actually be a little bit overwhelming. So in the courthouse, you can go, or you should be able to go, and get similar information about the demographics, most importantly regarding sentencing. So this is important, primarily for defendants to find out, am I being treated fairly, regardless of my background, when you look across sentencing as a whole. But it's also important for victims, because sometimes victims think that they are being treated differently based on the same sort of demographic information. That sort of transparent sentencing information is in the data trove that is in now the possession of our friend AFTAB. And the technology is available to make all of that information transparent on a per judge basis, and it's something we should be doing first on the criminal side so people know that sentencing is transparent and fair, and secondly, and this is what I do now, on the civil side, so we know that people are getting similar outcomes when they have similar cases, or that one community is not always losing their appeal cases just because they happen to be a certain kind of community. That's the kind of information that we can put up on a per judge basis that people can go and see on just a public web portal in an aggregate form, that's anonymous, that will allow people to make a determination, is this judge doing their job? Because, it would also be like, what is your caseload? How quickly do you turn over cases? Are cases sitting on your docket? And are they doing it fairly? That is it demographically across the board something that is being fair? So I think that's something easy that we could do that is not being done. The third thing is something that we were talking a little bit about, is the opiate situation in our county. And our county is kind of the headline county for opiates, and our interaction and our location on the interstate highway system makes us a kind of a distribution center and an abuse center. I think that our current jail is, and it's being criticized about this, and there's some people who are calling for additional jail space. It's basically a catch and release model of opiate treatment, where our jail is a catch and release, and then people are not really being treated. Now, the county commission has made some efforts to make treatment part of the jail. Frankly, I don't think the jail is a place for people to get drug treatment. And I think that we should change catch and release to catch and cure. And the way we do that is we have a more intense mandatory diversion program by which the jail is not that treatment option of default, and people don't become frustrated because people are caught and released. So that's something that the judges can work with the county commission, which is committed to help solve that problem. But also, people like Deaver in the state legislature and the people who are interested in providing funding from the state, because for a long time they've taken money away from local jurisdictions. If we can release some of that surplus funding from the state, and we can also get, that president of ours to make the opiate emergency not just a declaration, but actually a provision of resources, we can help cure that problem, which is having a profound effect on how our jail and how our justice system is being used. So those are the three ideas that I have regarding our Common Pleas Court. If you have more questions about Common Pleas, the jurisdiction, or anything like that, now's your time to ask, and we can both answer as best we can. Yes, sir.
For one thing, I'm not sure I want judges touching me any more than I want our president doing it. But I know what you mean.
I promise not to touch you.
It seems to me a lot of what you're talking about has to do with fairness. And we know that when we look at, for instance, the very visible Supreme Court, we see quite a difference between what are called conservative and liberal judges. But I'm wondering if you would talk about what it really means to be a Democrat as a judge or a Republican as a judge, when judges are supposed to be neutral and unbiased.
Well, as Tom said, everybody has an implicit bias. Part of that data collection process is understanding that we have implicit bias. I think a judge, their task is to apply the law as written, but a lot of times our judges come at that with a bias that makes them apply it in a way that's particularly slanted. So for example, that taking away of resources from local entities is, to me, as a Democrat, directly in conflict with the ability of local jurisdictions to have what in the Ohio Constitution is called home rule. And we should be able to control our own destinies, which to me seems like a very Republican, small r idea. But guess what? The Republicans, big R, are taking those resources away from local jurisdictions in a way that hampers the idea of home rule. I think there's that kind of a divide that is a political divide, which people don't recognize, but which is true when you apply the law. You come at it with a certain perspective. I come at it with a perspective in that particular area that's informed by my past litigation of those issues. But, you know, the law is as the law is, but you come at it with a certain perspective. And I think that, you know, like with the idea of restorative justice, I think that like a law and order Republican is going to be much more likely to say, to not listen to the idea of mercy, but embedded in the idea of justice is also the idea of mercy. And restorative justice is not foreign to the idea of what should be accomplished in our courthouse.
And as a follow-up, could you talk a little bit about judges and religious belief?
So, of course, judges come to the courtship. This also goes to what is your bias. And I don't think that religious belief should necessarily have an influence on how you apply the law, but you can't escape, you know, how you were taught, where you grew up, what your religion is. I grew up in Madeira. I went to St. Gertrude. I went to Moeller. I'm a product of the Catholic education in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I'm hyper aware of that bias. And I understand that other people don't come from that same background. I think that, you know, the lesson of the First Amendment is not that you exclude beliefs from the courthouse, but you understand other people's beliefs. And you have to, as a judge, be conscious that your belief is a belief and not a law.
Yes, whatever happened to separation of church and state? What happened?
Thanks very much. I am certainly convinced that I want to vote for Democrats in these positions for judges. Now, for years, I was always left at my door a Democratic ballot. You would have been on it, right? I mean, we knew who the Democrats were. That has ended in my neighborhood. I live close to here. Now, I mean, should we should all get in touch with our precinct captains or what? Because we need that.
What is your neighborhood?
Paddock Hills. It's right around my...
No, I know. I was District 4 prosecutor for a long time. So I love your community council, by the way. It was some of those rational people. No,
Yeah.
you need to get in. You need to call your ward chair. If you don't know your ward chair, come see me after.
All
I'll
right.
pull it up. I'll get you the information so you can contact them. Go ahead.
Was there likely to be able to provide these ballots?
No, but they will. And that's one of the things that it's one of the things that we're working on right now. This is where we're a little bit different than we've been in the past. And Terry brought this up a little bit. In 2016, we started doing this. We started having a coordinated campaign. This year, we have a coordinated campaign. We're here together. Pavin's having his kickoff tonight, or he'd be here too. You're going to have the Court of Appeals candidates out here, and they're all going to be talking to you. You haven't had that before. As judges, you know, one of the great things about being a lawyer is we are kind of hyper-organized, and we understand the stakes that we're going up against. We will be contacting all the ward chairs to make sure that you're getting this information dropped out. We're also going to make sure that the heavy Democratic areas, which Paddock Hills is still getting the... You are.
Yeah, it's fairly Democratic
Right.
now. It's not as much as it used to be.
But we will have the money, and if we have your support to get this out, we will be distributing lit to registered Democrats so you all know who we are. We're still going to be doing lit and persuasion pieces, but there is no reason that a member of this club should not have a sample ballot because you're all involved with the party. It should be sent to you in the mail. You should be receiving it by email. There should be somebody coming by the door to drop it off so you know who to vote for. And as judges, that's very important. You're going to know Aftab's running in the 1st District. Everybody knows that. We don't get the same media attention that they do, and for good reasons. We can't talk about issues. This is, it's different. But we can make sure that we do have the resources so that you get the ballot, so that when you go in, you know who the Ds are and who the Republicans are by vice versa. Jerry, you want to say something?
Well, I would say this, you know, the Republicans do have a machine, and every year they produce a little pink sheet that has everybody's name on it. And they've been doing it for the last half century, and it looks the same, and it's just very simple. And the Democrats need to think about doing the same kind of thing, and they need to do it at every place where they're going to produce significant Democratic votes, and ideally in every precinct. But that's a challenge because the Democratic Party needs volunteers who are willing to staff those precincts for the purpose of handing out that ballot in a way that's motivated not just by you're a paid person who's sitting there, but by someone who wants to achieve the result of the Democratic Party.
Let me ask you one question real quick, just show of hands. Who in the room is a precinct executive? Okay, so we need, that's one of the things that hasn't been taken advantage of in the past. And one thing that back in 2001, before we had email with David Crowley, is one thing I always did was call the precinct executives in the areas where we were going to walk and where we needed people at the precincts. So I had those people walking in the neighborhood with us and at the polls. Because if you're in that neighborhood, you should be working that poll. If you're coming out to this lunch meeting, you're dedicated, you want to see Democrats win, you should be given the ability, you should be given the call. We should be calling you, the party should be calling you and say, listen, we need you as a precinct executive in this precinct. And when it comes to election day, you should be getting a call a month in advance, like the Republicans do, saying, will you be working on your precinct on election day? We've got you down from 7:30 to 3:30. And we will drop off the sample ballots at your house so that you have them there, so you have lit to get out. We've started going with the blue sheet. Caleb Fox did a great job last election, did the blue sheet and limited releases. A lot of us are pushing to stay with the blue sheet so the Democrats have a nice, great ballot, looks like a ballot, you can fold it up, it's not a glossy piece of paper, our pictures aren't on it, it's just a list of all the Democrats who are going to be on the ballot. It's a lot cheaper than those picture things that we produced before. We can produce a lot more for the same cost, and we can get them out to you so that you can hand them out in your neighborhood so that you can work election day and get them out on election day.
As I suggested, Terry, at an earlier meeting, I still think you guys should have a yard sign that just says Democratic judges. I would love to have one, because name recognition is your biggest problem.
Yeah.
But what I really want to ask, based on my vast knowledge of films, is about jury trials, because I know that anyone who asks for a jury trial is going to be hideously punished by the judge.
Well, unfortunately, this is basically, I think, true on the criminal side, and I think there's a lot of fear that motivates people on the civil side to avoid civil trials. I don't think that a judge should disincentivize and enshrine constitutional right. And I think a judge should be conscious at the end of that process, especially after the end of that process, that, you know, it may have been a close call, it may have been a difficult call, it's a chance for a jury of your peers to speak, but it should not be a chance to advance a punishment.
Actually, Peter, I want to follow up that real quick. So, I do agree with Terry. When I was a prosecutor, there were some judges who did come. It was called. And as judges, I know that's something both me and Terry are interested in, because sometimes you don't even realize that you've done it, because you do so many trials during a week. You don't realize that you're actually giving a trial tax. And we can make that better just by getting that information out.
Let me tell you about some of the analytics that the Supreme Court does do. They actually track the number of trials that are performed in each county, and on a per-judge basis for the last year that was reported, it was less than 7 jury trials per judge. And that could be a one-day jury trial. And it probably includes the jury trials that were referred to what is called a visiting judge. So you may have a perception that the judges in the courthouse actually trying cases, but that perception is wrong. And a trial is called a trial because it's difficult. So it's difficult for the litigants, it's difficult for the attorneys, and guess what? It's difficult for the judge. But it should be a big part of their job because it's in the Constitution.
I have a question. In the context of prison sentencing, are you aware of an issue of influence by deep-pocketed lobbyists in pushing for longer sentences, regardless of?
So I am not familiar with that on like some sort of institutional level. I don't think that that's something that happens in the courthouse. I don't think that there's at some sort of state level an institutionalization of, we gotta have as harsh a sentence as possible because this is the way we achieve justice. I don't know that that's happening. Actually, I think like Deaver And some of the Republicans are like, wow, this costs a lot to incarcerate people. It's like counter to their whole, like, we can't tax people sort of feeling. So I don't think there's that, like, state level, we've got to incarcerate people.
It's really, I know we're overcrowded, but I've read about the for-profit prisons.
We do
That
not,
could be an issue.
we don't sentence to for-profit prisons in Hamilton County. All our prisons are state-run, so there is no financial incentive. There have been kickbacks before in different states, but the state of Ohio right now is public prisons, which still have a lot of issues, don't get me wrong, but you run into incredible moral issues when you start incarcerating people for money that comes back to the state. It just creates lots of issues. We do work with nonprofits. I'm on the Tallard House Board, and we do have some treatment facilities that the county does work with to send people out. We do it with OBIs, we are starting to do it with some opiate treatments, but those are for nonprofit agencies, and there is no money going back. They're full public boards, so everything is transparent that way. But for for-profit prisons, we don't deal with them. I said Hamilton County, and the reason I said that is because I know we don't. I'm not sure Cleveland and Columbus. I don't think that they do for state. That's my understanding, but I actually am going to follow up just to make sure that that is correct for the entire state. I think so. I don't want to say that though right now. I just know we don't in the county.
Thank you both for being here. It's nice to meet some very progressive individuals. I have one very important question, since we all know and are working hard to make sure that AFTAB is our next congressman in this district. Who are you going to get to replace him in the district?
AFTAB has several great lieutenants. He has several different people working at different levels who are the municipal and common pleas heads, who both, I believe, have enough experience to be able to step in. I don't know what the election procedure, though, is if he gets in. So I think Terry does.
Well, so I think that I think for the clerk of courts as a county elected position, if he were to go to a different position, I think that the county chair actually gets to pick the person.
Okay.
So it would probably be someone out of the clerk's office. I'll tell you a funny story about AFTAB. So I've been going to the courthouse since I started my legal career, since 1996. I actually worked in the courthouse for a Republican judge for a year and a half. So I have been literally in the courthouse on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, all of my legal career, walking through the halls, 1 through 5. I had never seen a clerk of courts. I am on the 5th floor. It's like, December or it's January of 2017. I'm walking down the 5th floor, which is, vacant, empty. It's like, where are the people? And here comes AFTAB. I'm like, wow, the clerk of courts is here. That's what we need from all of our elected officials. I mean, really, some people say 90% of life is showing up. Well, guess what? More than 90% of life for an elected official should be showing up.
I have a question about adolescents and what your position is on trying them as adults.
So the juvenile court does the bind over, and that bind over, then I think it becomes mandatory. I don't think that the Common Pleas Court judge can then send it back. So really that's a juvenile court question. The juvenile court is a division of the Common Pleas Court. It's not up for election this year. So, I mean, that is a really important thing because, there are occasions when people should be bound over as an adult, but there are occasions when people end up in adult court and they should not be in adult court because they're never going to get restorative justice if they end up in the jail and the prison system as a juvenile.
And going back, that just started when I was ending my juvenile public defender career. We did not have the mandatory bind over for the first 3 years. The last 2 we did. It's not a good, I can't say that because I'm running for judge. It is a difficult law. It creates undue burdens on the judge, but it does have a procedure that is rather thorough. It creates other steps before there is a bind over. There are some mandatory cases where it has to be considered for a bind over. Those are your most heinous cases, your murder, your F1 felonies. But it still does allow for some discretion for the common pleas judges who are elected to the juvenile court. The court that we are dealing with, as Terry said, we would have no discretion once something is bound over, but it is going back to changing the culture, to going to make sure that it is more of a restorative model rather than a straight punitive model law. Punitive is required. There are certain cases where restorative is much more beneficial to both parties.
Bennett?
I think our criminal injustice system is bloated and way too big, and it employs a lot of people, from cops to prison guards to attorneys to judges. I used to tell attorney jokes, but I don't tell them anymore because attorneys don't think they're funny, and the rest of us don't think they're jokes. However, who knows it,
So let's have your favorite attorney joke.
Yeah, no, you gotta say.
You already got it.
Okay.
You know, I'd just like you guys to comment on the size of our incarceration rate and why we lead the world in incarceration, and what American values does that represent, to lead the world in incarceration?
I don't think that it does show our true values. I think that one of the things that you brought up is that it is a rather large, it's a large system. It's a bloated system. There are a lot of issues within there that have created a mass incarceration state that is not beneficial to anyone. But we've got its theme that we've been talking about all day, and it's one of those things of restorative justice. One of the things that we can do if we do change the culture in the courthouse is shift those resources over from a pure punitive to actually make them to a more restorative area. There have been several states that have made changes that Amos has gone right now with, which they're pushing forward to have no jail sentencing for drug offenses. No one has done it with a constitutional amendment, but several prosecutors, most likely the one in Philadelphia, has made decisions that they are not going to interpret the law that way. As judges, we don't influence that. Like Terry said, well, let me rephrase that. As judges, that's not how we deal with that. We have to interpret the law the way it is written, the way it is brought before us, either in criminal charges or in suits. But when you have a courthouse that is open to restorative justice, that is open to having these dialogues and these conversations, then you get more people aware of what is possible, that it does not simply have to be a punitive model. Then you have prosecutors change. Then you have people who come in those offices as those elected officials who are looking more as a restorative justice model than purely as a punitive model where they say, if you commit the crime, you have to do the time. That's a backwards way of thinking. There is a much more developed system that we have, even in the county now, that we can take advantage of. If we bring in more judges who are willing to invest in those, we can make more changes.
If part of your answer is not poverty and race, then you're missing the report.
What, that's restorative.
No, but being specific.
If somebody does benefit from that. The billionaires from poverty, they do benefit from it.
That goes into a deeper systematic society level, that where we need to focus on having more union jobs so we can have better protected workers. We need to bring things back.
You're here.
Right.
Those novel thought.
Okay. All right, so let me step down a little bit because I'm purely judgmental. We need to have better paying jobs in the city. We need to be able to focus more money on our schools so that we don't have kids who are running around in the afternoon getting into trouble, that they actually have schools they can go to that last and that they can do after-school programs. We need to have jobs that are available for people. We cannot keep shipping overseas these good-paying jobs to countries that don't appreciate, well, they do appreciate them, but they just don't pay their workers the same. It creates an imbalance for everyone. Going even further, we need a better transportation system so that people can get to their jobs, that they do have them in the suburbs. It's cheaper to build in the suburbs. We need those people to pay their fair share of taxes so that we can actually have a transportation system that can bring people out there. When the city right now, and Terry can talk more about this if we want, now has an apprenticeship program that requires people who have city contracts to actually have apprenticeship programs, so we're training workers to do these jobs. We're not just hiring them as temporary workers who don't have the training to do them well and then don't have the skills. That creates infrastructure that isn't stable, and it creates an infrastructure in society with workers who don't know how to keep jobs because they don't have the skills. Those are the things that we need as a democratic society. Those are the things, when you elect us to the courthouse, we go in with those values and those influence how we see things. But unfortunately, as judges, we don't set that policy, which we can't do.
Okay, we got one more question here.
I think Terry.
I was just going to say, judges really can't solve that problem. And, Alberta was talking about the plane going down at the beginning of her, when she introduced everybody. A lot of people think the American plane is going down right now. But I'm telling you that the solution to the problems that you're talking about are not in the courthouse. They're in the legislature, And they're most importantly in the ballot box. The way we
That's right.
benefit from that is because people are excited about the elected officials who can change state government. If Democrats go in and they vote all the way down, that will benefit us. But really, the people who have to be activated to change, society are the people who are in the ballot box. And I think you do that by, getting that blue sheet and doing, what we're asking you to do. I don't know that a judge can ever change society because a judge reflects kind of what is going on in society and the rules that are put in place by the people who are in charge. But a lot of people have a lot of problems with those rules right now. So, the only thing we can tell you is exercise that most fundamental constitutional right, which is to vote.
One last question. I served on the Hampton County Grand Jury a couple weeks ago.
How was that?
And, it was a wonderful experience.
Really?
I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what the law is.
Yeah.
Everybody should do it. If you get the opportunity, you need to do it. You've answered several of my questions I took away from the experience, but I got one last question. In that waiting room, for those whole 2 weeks, Fox News is on the TV. Who determines that?
Oh, that's Joe.
No, that's the jury commissioner. So the jury commissioner.
No, he's grand jury.
This is grand jury, Hampton County Grand Jury.
So you were over in the...
You weren't in the courthouse.
You weren't in the
I was in the other
The
building.
administration building.
Yeah,
So
that's Joe.
Yeah, it was
That's
probably the
Joe.
prosecutor's office, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it might not even have been, it's just kind of like inadvertent.
No! I'm just being fair on this one. That's Joe, yeah.
So how do we change that?
You get a new prosecutor.
Okay.
Bring your own remote.
I don't think Albert's gonna.
Well, they'd probably charge you with tampering. Okay?
I don't know about you, but I have really enjoyed seeing the faces of the people that I'm going to vote for anyway. I'm feeling better because I will vote for the Democratic judges, but it's really nice to see them in person and feel like you're worthwhile voting for. I want to just mention that we have coming speakers. Very fluid, let me remind you, because all of these guys have all kinds of commitments. But theoretically, next week, keep laughing, Katie, you're the one who has to handle
It's my
this.
life. Every day I get, I can't even tell you, that at 12:15 I get the cancellation and then I get on the horn to Tom right away and like, boom. We got that
Thank
taken
you.
care of. But every day.
Stepping up. James Wolf for Hamilton County Commissioner, we want to know who those guys are, because they do things like transportation that we need, that kind of stuff. We have gubernatorial candidates coming on April 10th.
That's right.
So theoretically, Cordray and Sutton is coming with that campaign, and some others. Schiavone's coming. He was supposed to be here today, but he canceled last minute. We won't get to see him. On April 17th, we have two candidates, Everhard and Schiller, and that should be exciting because we've seen a lot of Everhard and we know what she stands for, but I want to see who Schiller is. And Zach Space is going for Ohio Auditor, which is going to be a big deal.
Okay.
On April 24th, we have the Ohio State Treasurer, Rob Richardson, and the Ohio Attorney General, Steve Diddleback, and whoever else shows up, because there's a big meeting that day, right?
No, it's on the 10th at the gubernatorial in Middletown. There's going to be a debate that night. In fact, the tickets just went on sale for that. It's up in Middletown. But
And some of them may wind up coming here.
That's right.
Because they're going to become this part of the state. So we're going to see whoever shows up, folks. But it should be really good. And I hope you are enjoying the fact that we're trying to get these people before the May 8th primary.
Thank you.
There are more judges coming on May 1st. Pierre Bergeron going to be here, and several other judges, appeals judges, etc., will be here that day, so you get to see more judges.
More judges. I love judges, especially Democratic ones. Okay. Remember that new voters must be registered to vote a month before the primary. If you know an unregistered voter, by all means, we have voter registration forms back there. You might want to make a personal goal of getting one non-registered voter registered to vote, but it has to be a month before the primary.
April 19th. I've been heard the deadline is April 9th.
No, it's April 8th.
April 8th.
I handed out the papers 2 weeks ago about what they are, and you can go to the Hamilton County Board of Elections, and they will have that information. Exactly, they have it down to the hour, folks, to get that voter registration in. And the day after the last voter registration is, you are allowed to vote early, which is something I do. I'm one of those districts where they took the voting away from my garage. That was a very small area, because I have just 200 people in my Springfield L, and they have us voting in Cincinnati, even though we're Springfield Township. And I hate that, because I feel like when the electricity goes off, I'm never sure it's going to go to the right place. So I go to the Board of Elections. That's the right place. Take a copy of our most recent handouts for the coming speakers. Remember, that's fluid. We have till the end of May. Be sure to take the containers on the side and finish off the food. That's been very nice food, folks. And make sure that there are containers for you to take it home. Make sure that those vegetables get to the right place. And there's lots of rice and brown and white, and we want to make sure that it gets recycled and not go out to any place where it shouldn't go. So, thank you. You are a terrific audience. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your wonderful questions.
Might want to adjust.
Trial tax. Trial tax could go if you go in front of the judge. That's one of the other things that, like Terry says, to elaborate on, though, we need to change that culture in the courthouse. As a prosecutor, I like jury trials. They weren't as easy as bench trials, I'm going to be honest. It took more time, but like Terry said, it's a constitutional right. And people need to be secure that they are being heard and being represented fairly. There are judges out there who don't do the trial tax. What would be interesting to see, though, is, and this goes back to Terry's analytics, is we could track the sentencing. So you could see, actually, if there is a bias. We have that information. We can do that.